that was the excitement of the morning.
I thought it was the next one.
That too.
Is this on the street?
No.
Well, Doc, I got on the bus for free today.
You did?
Yeah. They changed the law as of Friday, April 25th. They changed it from 75 down to 67. So I'm now a free public transport guy.
You mean I could just get on there and...
But you have to change your rev cuff.
Oh, it's not so
You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your phone.
You put it on your phone?
You can change it. Could you ever fill it up on your phone?
No.
Okay, well, anyway,
I'll figure it out.
the guys will help you do that. You download the app and you could do that, and it took 5 minutes.
Wow.
And it was completely cool, and getting on the bus for free was the greatest.
Yeah.
And we had a vision of you being upset because, anyway. So,
This is the hop-on app, yeah?
what?
The hop-on app, the one that you normally just use for refilling the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The green one?
Yeah.
What's also nice is they put beds in the back of the bus. So I thought that was really nice. That was very sweet of them.
Do they also have like a hot soup or an IV drip as well?
The guy serving hot soup. I'm waiting for the guy to come around and check if I did my thing. Because you have to put it
He
on.
give you some satisfaction.
So I guess he'll check and then maybe he'll ask, are you okay? Do you want some tea?
Yeah, no.
Never know. The world's changing.
Baruch Hashem. Okay. On Thursday we learned a lot.
We did a lot.
Baruch Hashem.
Right.
Usfartem lechem mimachos Shabbos. We learned that this mitzvah Sir Sa'imer comes after Havah Sa'imer. First there's a korban, then we count. The korban is barley. Why is the korban barley? Well, we don't know yet. There's one other korban that's from barley, and that's Zoita. And why is her korban from barley? Her deeds were animalistic deeds, and so her korban is animal food, barley. Okay, but why it is that Tzfir Sa'imer, that the Omer should be from barley, is unclear at this point, right? Even though we have an inkling, right? What was the main question asked in the first paragraph?
Why does the pasuk say after Shabbos?
Right. Why does it say Mimakos HaShabbos and not Mimakos HaPesach? Right. Especially when there was all sorts of confusion in the times of Bayesheni as to what this actually meant, and the Tzedekим thought it should be taken literally, so it means after Shabbos Bereishis, which means they'd be counting. We made 14. They'd be at 8 last night, right?
And the Sadducees are different than the Tzedekим.
By Tusim and Stekim are two different people, but Baitis was one guy, Tzaddik was another guy. They were in cahoots. They were, you want to call it conservative and reconstructionist. I don't know. But it was all the same. The meaning movements within Judaism now obviously they were a little firmer than reconstructionists. They're probably a little firmer than conservative, but they had issues with rabbinic authority. Right? Okay, and they were powerful. I was powerful. There were Kohanim Gedalim who were staking, and there was. You can't say things like that because we don't know how God does things, but simple pshat in it all. There were reasons the Second Temple was destroyed. Right? There was a lot going on there. That was not the way it was supposed to be. Corruption, people, 50 years in a row, the Kohen Gadol died on Yom Kippur in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He wasn't fit to be there, and when he went in, he died. They would tie a rope around his legs so they could pull him out. Now, who was it that bribed someone to let him be the 35th? That's the one I never quite understood.
Irving Feldman.
It was Irving Feldman. Okay. He always was a strange cat.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, so that was our question. Why does it say Mimakos HaShabbos? In order to understand that, we have to understand something about Tzfir Sa'imer. And that's when we learned that all menachos come from wheat except 2, including the Eimer. Now, we should really understand what the answer to that question is, even though I don't think the Rebbe said it to us explicitly yet, right? But based on the pasuk in Shir Hashem, Mashcheni, draw me, pull me, acharecha narutza, after you we will run. The heavy, I don't think there's a vav in the pasuk actually. Heviani amelech hadarav, bring the king will bring me, singular again, to his chambers. Mashcheni, singular, draw me. What does that refer to?
Our nefesh.
Yeah, and what time?
The time of
Yetzias Mitzrayim. The tremendous miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim affected only our nefesh elokis. Our nefesh bahamis was affected. Obviously, knew what was going on. Conscious me can see that the dam, that the water turned to dam, and the frogs are all over the place. That I understood consciously, but it didn't bring about a change in my nefesh bahamis such that I was more connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even though I enjoyed the inspiration, but it didn't bring about a change. Right, and so Mashcheni is that those external events, all the miracles of Mitzrayim, affected only the Nefesh Elokis and not yet the Nefesh Bahamis. That's why it's singular. Mashcheni, Nefesh Elokis. Acharecha narutza, after you we will run. Now all of a sudden it's plural. Who's we? Nefesh Bahamis, Nefesh Elokis. Right, and why running? Because the Nefesh Bahamis runs. The Nefesh Bahamis, when it wants something, it wants it with the brain. It wants it with a lot of passion, a lot of energy. That's the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis. And so when the Nefesh Bahamis gets into Elokus, the language of the Rebbe is either the Nefesh Bahamis is not interested in Elokus at all, or if it is, it's running. It's very excited. It wants it now. Right? Okay, because that's the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis. And that affects, the Rebbe said, the Nefesh Elokis, because the Nefesh Elokis means that its teva is cool and calm, because the most basic expression of the Nefesh Elokis is seichel. Right? So when the midas, which is the basic expression of the Nefesh Bahamis, that doesn't mean there isn't intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis, there is, and that also doesn't mean there's not midas of the Nefesh Elokis, there is. That being said, the essential expression of the Nefesh Elokis is seichel, the essential expression of the Nefesh Bahamis is midas. When the cool, calm, and collected Nefesh Elokis encounters the passionate Nefesh Bahamis, the Nefesh Bahamis brings the Nefesh Elokis to a place that it itself might not have gotten to, this place of tremendous passion. So it runs with the Nefesh Bahamis to Elokus. This is one of the advantages of the Nefesh Elokis descending into Elam Hazeh and encountering a goof of the Nefesh Bahamis. I must say, I was thinking of discussing this with you when I heard it, because I was so taken by it, but I don't know, you might have heard it. Though it turns out it's very old. I had never ever heard this song. My kids knew it. One of my sons was over for Pesach. They were there for the Seder and a couple of days after, and he taught me the song. He played it for me. RB Rotenberg, who was the brains behind Dr. Midas, right, which is the best thing ever written for Jewish children. Just amazing stuff. So RB Rotenberg and a bunch of other chevra who sat in a basement in Toronto, Moshe Yes was one of them, they made up these incredible tapes for Jewish kids, stories and songs that are just absolutely astounding. So he wrote an amazing song called Neshamala. Ever heard the song Neshamala? I also never heard of the song. Neshamala. So it turns out that my son played it for me with RB Rotenberg singing with Mordechai ben David. One of them is the Malach and the other is the Neshama. Right? A Malach says to a Neshama, you have to come with me. It's your time to go down. And the Neshama says, no, I'm scared. I don't want to go down. It's a place full of tumah and darkness. I don't want to go there. So the Malach says, you have to come. So the Malach takes the Neshama down a little, and the Neshama, as he gets a little closer to Elam Hazeh, sees that not it's true. There's a lot of klipa, but there's people doing mitzvahs and people learning Torah. So he gets excited. He said, "Okay, I want to go there, but on one condition: what? You stay with me. Don't leave me alone down there." And the Malach says to the Neshama, "No, I'm going to give you a little kanak, and you're going to forget you ever met me, and you're going to be all by yourself, and you're going to do just fine." So, wow. So the neshama comes down. That's the first part of the song. Then the neshama comes down, and then the malach comes back. Says, you have to come back with me. He says, no, I don't want to. I can do so much down here. There's so much more to do. I don't want to leave.
Wow.
He says, no, you have to leave. And they go back up. It's unbelievable, this song. It's like, whoo! Neshamala. Google it and listen to it. Listen to the A.B. Rothenberg Mordechai Ben David version. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. So A.B. Rothenberg was he's still around, Baruch Hashem. Had a chush for some amazing stuff. So he wrote that song. So that's the neshama, right? The neshama comes down in Deilam Hazeh, and it doesn't want to come in Deilam Hazeh, and it's scared of Deilam Hazeh with all the craziness down here. But when it gets here, it realizes that there's advantages to being with the goof and the Nefesh Bahamis. And so that's what, when I heard it, I said I was actually going to play it for you guys in the first Chassidus class, but I can't with this thing doing it, you know. I don't know how to stop this. I'll start in with that. But look up Neshamala and play it. It'd be a good thing to listen to before Shacharis. It's like really, it's an unbelievably powerful song. A.B. Rothenberg. Who would think something creative would ever come out of Toronto? But the Dr. Mida stuff was, I have adult children who have, well, one of them has 10 kids, the other one has 6 kids. They downloaded the music and they listen to it to this day. Not the stories. There's stories in between, every time there's like a little story. Dr. Midas builds a Midas machine. The marvelous Midas machine.
Midas alert.
Right, and so when there's some kid acting improperly, so Dr. Midas sits at a computer and he gets a Midas alert. And so then he presses the whatever it happens to be. So they press the Midas alert, and a song comes on teaching whichever kid was messing up in that particular thing. It teaches them a song about that, about Haknas Sorchim or keep it Aveim or whatever it happens to be. You may call him Abba, maybe you'll call him Tati. It's an unbelievable song. So our kids listen to them as kids and still listen to them, and unfortunately most of them, their kids don't speak English, and so they're all upset that their kids can't listen to marvelous Midas. But some of the older ones do. So the neshama is affected positively by its descent into Eilam Hazeh, by virtue of running into the Nefesh Bahamis. And Heviani Melech Hadarav was Matan Torah. So those 3 periods of time, Pesach, Sfir Sa'omer, and Matan Torah, are all mentioned in that pasuk. Mashcheni, Pesach. Acharecha Narutza, Sfir Sa'omer. So therefore, Sfir Sa'omer is all about what? Nefesh Bahamis. Right? Elevating Nefesh Bahamis. So that's why evidently the Eimer is barley food. Even the Rebbe hasn't said it explicitly yet, but that's clearly where we're going. Right? And Shavuos. Okay. Vehine. Now the Rebbe's going to talk about it. Vehine. Ha'eimer. Inyan ha'eimer. Shu Aveda milamata lamayla, which is the Aveda from below above. Second paragraph, page 54. Aveda b'nefesh Bahamis, which is the Aveda b'nefesh Bahamis. Yesh b'zeh beis inyanim. There's 2 different aspects to Aveda with the Nefesh Bahamis. Birur hameichin the Nefesh Bahamis, the rectification and purification of the intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis. Ubirur midos the Nefesh Bahamis, and working on the midos, the emotional attributes of the Nefesh Bahamis. Meichin is coming to get my human intellect to understand truth, which it can. My human intellect can be very excited and interested in truth. And if it encounters the truth, which is called Torah, it gets very excited about learning Torah and changing its understanding of reality based on its learning of Torah. Okay. So obviously that's the first thing I have to do, because I'm not going to bring about real change in myself if I don't realize there's something called truth and there's something better or different than what I'm doing. Okay. So there's Bira Mechin and there's Bira Midas. Bira Midas is, what are Midas generally? My connection to that which is outside of me. Right now, even though obviously Midas exist inside of me, so there's the subconscious reality of Midas, my emotional structure, but there's also, what are emotions about? Emotions are my relationship to things outside of me, right? How I relate to those things, how aware I am of them, how sensitive I am to them, right? Okay. Now the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis, the outside will be me, the natural inclination of the Nefesh Bahamis. What will it be sensitive to? Me. What will it relate to all day long? Me. Who will it have conversations with all day long? Me. Right? Okay. But it can be changed and elevated and educated and illuminated so that it doesn't act that way and isn't naturally inclined to do that anymore, right? So that starts first with an intellectual appreciation of the fact that that might not be the way to be, and then working slowly but surely on somehow making the Nefesh Bahamis a kli for the godly desires of the Nefesh Elokis, which it can be and can understand. At first it can understand that that's a reasonable thing to be, and then it can ultimately bring about in itself that change. Okay, so that's the beer of the Midas. Now, Surah Emer clearly seems to be beer of Midas. Why do I say that?
Because
Every day we count a different Midah, right? We're about to start Tiferes, right? So, yeah, every day is a different Midah. So, what about the Mechi? Where's that? Well, let's see. The base in Yonim Elohim, Hakrovas Ha'emer, Usfiras Ha'emer. Sacrificing the Emer, the meal offering of barley, which is interesting enough is animal food. So it's if the Emer is shaykh to intellect, which we'll see, and the Rebbe is going to explain why. If the Emer is shaykh to intellect, so then it's shaykh to the intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis. Barley food, animal food, barley. Yes, it's grain, but it's animal grain. Hakrava Seimer, Usira Seimer. Takrava Seimer, who bitter hameichim, the Nefesh Bahamis. Bringing the sacrifice, that's the Aveda bitter hameichim, which can happen in one day, and does happen in one day, which has a lot to do with the difference between Meichin and Midas. Meichin is a state of Achdus. Meichin is a state where details, now obviously in order to understand something, you have to understand the details of it, that's true. But true understanding, interestingly enough, is when you understand something, even if it has a lot of details, if you can't bring all of those details into one point that seems to encapsulate everything about this idea, so then you don't really understand the idea, right? And that, yeah?
What's the simple definition of Biru Hamachi?
Rectification of intellect. Beer is rectification, right? So that, the Chachma is that point, which is the nature of intellect. Bina is taking that point and bringing that point into some fleshed out state of detail. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's the Bina. And then I can say, Ani Mevin. Okay, but I am Mevin on an external level. What's Pnimius Bina? Pnimius Bina is bringing it back to its point. Right? Therefore, if you really understand something and you heard someone speak for an hour, you should be able to explain in a sentence or two what the basic point of that person's speech was. And if you can't do that, you didn't understand what he was talking about. Right? If you have to spend an hour to go over what he just said, well, then you didn't understand it. You're just parroting it back. But if you can say his basic point was this, boom, that's Pnimius Bina. Right? That's the Nakuda, taking it back to its source in Chochmah, but it's Pnimius Bina, right? And that's when you really understand something, and that's when you can really forbring about something, right? Because what's so interesting about forbringing is what's happening in the head of the person talking. Well, all these little points that contain that, it's like sound bites, that's the in a computer, what does a computer do? It takes all that information and pushes it back into one little, a byte, whatever they call it, right? Okay. So in that byte, what's in there? Everything's in there. So you press the button, it all comes out, right? Okay. But really, it's all contained in that. So that's what happens in our head, right? When we truly understand something. And for bringing is, you're sort of pressing different buttons because you're not thinking in terms of hour-long presentations. Just like an idea pops in your head. Okay, then you might bring about the idea for an hour, but the idea was one little point, right? That ends up becoming a topic of conversation for a while. Okay, fine. So, intellect be'etzem is one. Either I understand or I don't. So, biur amechin is one day. Either I get it or I don't get it.
Are we saying which day though, or are we just saying it
Tes
can?
Zayin Nisan, yeah, absolutely. Tes Zayin Nisan, that's when the Eimer was brought. Tes Zayin Nisan went out, cut the Eimer, and brought the korban. Cut the Eimer at night and brought the korban in the day. Mm-hmm. Now we count at night already, even before the Eimer was cut. But in the Beis Hamikdash, they would probably start counting after the korban. They would count the first day in the day. I would assume. I don't know, but I would assume that's what they did, right? Because the Indian was to first bring the Eimer and then start counting. So Tes Zayin Nisan, they would have counted in the afternoon, right? I guess with a bracha, even though when we count the day, I don't know. We'll figure it out, right? All sorts of interesting halachas about Sfiras Eimer in terms of, ger shenizgayer, a ger who does giur in the middle of the Eimer. Do they count with a bracha or not? When do they start counting? They start counting on the 23rd day. Well, if you started counting on the 23rd day, you don't say a bracha, because if you miss a full day, you don't say a bracha. Because there's a question as to whether it's one mitzvah 49 times or 49 separate mitzvahs. If it's one mitzvah with 49 components, so then if I missed one, then I can't say a bracha, which is why we don't if someone misses a full day. If you miss a full day, you can't say the bracha for the next, let's say, 23 days. Right? I don't want to give anybody an eye and heart of missed day 26, but right, okay? So if you miss at night, so you count in the day without a bracha, and then the next night you can say a bracha, because you didn't miss that day. So what about ger shenizgayer in the middle? Or a boy has his bar mitzvah in the middle, or a girl has her bas mitzvah in the middle. What do they do? I remember this question came up at a friend's son's bar mitzvah, so he went to the Amud to daven Ma'ariv. It was his bar mitzvah, it was the night, it was his bar mitzvah. And of course it was exciting, he could daven for the Amud, so we started davening for the Amud, and then we realized a minute into davening, wait a minute. what a Eimer. He's going to make a bracha. He can make a bracha. That's we like it hit us in the middle. All of us were looking around in Birchas Krishma. We couldn't talk. We're going. Everybody had the same question. So after we finished Manas, we stopped. Called Rav Ashkenazi Olav Shalom in Kfar Chabad and said, "What do we do?" He said, "You should make a bracha." So he made a bracha. But it's an interesting question because of the nature of Sfiras Eimer. Is it 49 different mitzvahs? In which case, it doesn't matter when you start, so you just make a bracha, right? Put on tefillin. It's a new mitzvah putting on tefillin today than the mitzvah you did on Friday. Completely different mitzvah. Same mitzvah, but different time. There's no question you put on, you say a bracha. Is that the same with Eimer? Or is it, no, there's a mitzvah that's do something 49 times, and if you don't do it 49 times, so then you missed. Isn't that the mitzvah? That doesn't mean you don't keep counting. You keep counting just without a bracha. So that's one of the reasons that the Shliach Tzibur says a bracha after Shemona Esrei, right? That if there's someone who needs to hear the bracha, the Shliach Tzibur should have that person in mind. If anybody has to hear this bracha, I'm being beitzi them with this bracha, right? Very important for someone who's saying Kaddish to never miss Eimer.
Yeah.
Right? Now you say, how can they miss? They're in shul, whatever. They were sick in bed one day and had someone else say Kaddish that day, and they forgot Eimer that day. Right? Now, sometimes there are certain minyanim where the Rav of the shul counts, right? So that would alleviate that problem. But it's the whole inyan of the bracha is an interesting thing. Okay, so first there's that's one day. Havasa Eimer is one day. Tes Zion and Bira Midas. I mean it's a discussion unto itself. And Chassidus we talked about it for 5 minutes. Meichin is an inyan in Achdus. Either you, to say it simply, either you get it or you don't. Okay. So that's one day. Midas are all about detail, different expressions of your emotional state. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and even Chesed itself is Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed. And the Rebbe is going to go through the Midah of Chesed 7 times, really 14 times. He's going to go through it 7 times mitzad the Nefesh Elokis and 7 times mitzad the Nefesh Bahamis. What's Chesed Shebechesed? What's Gvura Shebechesed? Okay, so we'll see that. But first, the Rebbe is going to explain the basic inyan of Sfir saying it's obviously Shaykh to the Nefesh Bahamis. And then what's next? So now, first of all, the Bira Meichin. Why? It comes from Dagan, grain. The Dagan of Inyan Meichin. Grain is shaykh to intellect. How do we know that? Famous Gemara in Brachos. The intellectual growth of a child is very, very powerfully connected to when they start eating grain. And so a child starts speaking after they start eating solid foods. Right? I mean, there's a connection between the two. And the grain is brain food, literally. Now, certainly we know that nutrition has a lot to do with the intellectual development of a child. I mean, not just the physical development, but the intellectual development of the child. Right? And if you don't believe me, so go talk to Bobby Kennedy. He'll explain it all to you. Right? But there's no question that that's true, right? The intellectual, obviously the physical development, but the intellectual development also, right? Okay. Specifically, Chazal tell us, Dagan. Dagan is brain food, literally. Oh, but interesting. Which Dagan? I'm sorry. Yeah, the Avshe that even though in general, Hine Minchas Ha'emer, the meal offering of the Eimer Ba Mi Michael Behema, it comes from Michael Behema. Liyai, since She'inyana Eimer, the whole idea of Eimer who Aveda B'Nefesh Bahamis is the Aveda B'Nefesh Bahamis. Amnam, however, Bezeh Gufa, and this itself, Hiba Mina Dagan Davka. Grain. Hainu HaMechin the Nefesh Bahamis. The intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis. Animal food, yes, but grain. So it's shaykh to animal, it's shaykh to my Nefesh Bahamis. But the rectification is of the intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis so that conscious you and I can be aware of the truth. That's the first thing necessary. So I'm not aware of the truth, I'm not going to change my emotional state. Shanefesh Bahamis, sine gama mechin kshurim v'shayachim elamidos. The Nefesh Bahamis, also the Meichin, are connected and relevant to the Midas. In other words, they have a very, very powerful effect on the Midas. Now, in general, Meichin has a powerful effect on Midas. But in the Nefesh Elokis, they're more 2 different worlds. B'chlal, Seichel and intellect are 2 different, Seichel and emotions are 2 different worlds. Seichel and Midas, intellect and emotions. 2 completely different worlds. Right? And that's why very often a person who's intellectually gifted will be emotionally less gifted. They'll find relating to people difficult. They won't be naturally good at that. Right? Whereas there are other people who are naturally gifted at emotional connection, but they might not be as sharp as some other people. Not as people who are blessed with both. There are people who are never blessed with neither, right? But it's very often the case that serious intellect will also result in a person not being particularly good at relating to other people, right? It used to, in my day, they used to call him an egghead. Right, but now what's the geek, the computer geek, right? So the computer geek is great with numbers, but he's not so good with people, right? Now, that doesn't mean he can't develop that, but naturally, that he finds that more difficult to do. Can we imagine such a situation? Of course we can imagine such a situation. Okay, so what's the difference? What's going on with that person? Very developed intellectually, less developed emotionally. They're not dependent one on the other, but that's a fairly common thing, right? Okay.
Sorry, can you go over again what it means that Bezek Gufahi Ba mean Hadagan Dafka? What's exactly coming from it itself?
The owner, the offering. The offering comes from grain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not bringing a cow as an expression of the behemishkeit. We're dafka bringing grain. Why? Because we're specifically relating to the intellect of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and grain is connected to intellect. That's what grain is about. That's what mincha is about. Mincha has a lot to do with bir amechin. Right? Korban of a behemoth has a lot to do with bir amidas, right? It's that you're taking the animal, and putting it up on the altar, on the mizbeach, as opposed to the meal offering, which is much more subtle. Intellect. So intellect and emotion are two different worlds, even though they do connect, because there is an emotional aspect of intellect, what's called midas shebamechin, and there's an intellectual aspect of midas, which is called mechin shebamidas. Right? So just quickly, that's an important thing to understand. So let's talk about it for a couple of minutes, and we'll get back to the words in the minor. Mechin shebamidas, that's the easiest one to understand. What's mechin shebamidas? Well, the intellect of emotions. Okay, what does that mean? Well, animals do not have what you and I call intellect. They can't do mathematical problems, right? Even Mr. Ed beat you to it, right? Okay, you can't do mathematical. Mr. Ed probably could, but okay. You can't do mathematical problems. Now, does that mean he has no intellect? Well, that's not true. Anybody who's ever had any relationship with any animal, whether it be a dog or a cat, or watched them, or watched the National Geographic special on, how they hunt together. Obviously, there's intellect there. What's that intellect? That intellect is not the intellect that humans have. There's something humans have that's very, very unique called human intellect, which is an absolutely incredible thing. It happens to be the source of all evil in the world, because the only creature that can do something against the will of God is that creature that has that thing called intellect. Humans, animals can't do something against the will of God, but humans can. Okay, so they can use that intellect for all sorts of terrible things, but that intellect is completely unique and is not shared by any animal. That doesn't mean they're stupid, but what are they able to do? They're able to come to the conclusion, shezeh tov li, this is good for me, therefore I should have a connection to it. That's the mechin shebamidas. The understanding that the animal has that this is good to eat. I should eat this, and it's good. It's going to taste good, and I won't be hungry anymore. As opposed to this is not good to eat. Or I might have to do this in order to get my food. They can be pretty clever, right? The fox can outsmart the farmer. But this fox is not outsmarting the farmer by virtue of coming to this great mathematical conclusion regarding exactly the angle of how the fence is working. That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is, that chicken is good for me, and I'm going to do everything I can figure out how to do to get that chicken, because that's as far as he can go. Ha'im zeh tov li or not? And that's the maskana that one comes to, the conclusion one comes to. Now, a human comes to that after intellectual, and hopefully, not always. I mean, sometimes no, but that's. I mean, when the Nefesh HaBahamis gets the best, when the Nefesh HaBahamis gets the best of us, so then that conclusion will come from an emotional desire for something, and I'll have to rationalize it because I can't not, or else I won't do it. But the rationalization will be very much in the context of zetovli. Very Nefesh HaBahamis, very low level of human intellect, even though it will involve human intellect. right? Because I'll rationalize why it's okay. Okay, I can't do it if I won't do that. Right? Okay, Beseder. That being said, the rationalization will be that it's not bad for me. It's okay for me. It's not a problem. The nefesh, the intellect of the nefesh abamis, and in humans it's also the same. You and I might think about something in a sophisticated way, right? Think about it, okay. But when does the thinking turn into emotion? When we come to a conclusion regarding that thing and regarding the nefesh abamis, the conclusion will be, at least without work, zeh tov li. This is good for me. This is a reasonable thing to do because it's good for me. That's the midas. That's the making of the nefesh bahamis making that decision. Just like animals. Animals there's an aspect to the making of their midas. They're all midas animals. Okay, say that. There's no making as you and I experience making. But there's no question they make decisions. Right? The dog knows to come to the door and scratch the door to go out or to come back in. Right? He'll come to the window of the living room where everybody is, and he puts his paws up there, and he's like, and oh, you want to come in? And then you walk to the door, and he sprints to the door, and he's waiting there, all excited, and he comes in, and he's right. How does he figure that all out? Zeh tov li. Right? I want to be inside. Right? It's all midos, but of course there's some intellect going on in there. I mean, you can teach him tricks, right? My sister used to have a trick. She had this cute little dog. It was a little too little, but it was a cute dog. You know, one of those yappy little white things. You know, but it was a cute. It had a great personality, and so they would put a cookie at the end of the room and go trafe, 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 and she'd be sitting there like shaking. Kosher, she'd run over and go get the cookie. So you can teach the dog how to do that, right? Why? Zeh tov li. I'm going to get a cookie if I don't go when they say treif. She figured that out. She was also little, so she could stand on her back feet, like she was small. So she could her feet were only this big, right? So she could stand up like that for quite a while, right? And so they point a gun at her. And she'd stand up and put her paws up. No. Yeah. And then they go bang, and she'd fall over. She was a riot, this dog. But she was a dog, right? Because how did she figure all that out? What did she get after she did that? A treat. Zeh tov li. Right? Now, human nefesh, Jewish nefesh abamis, can come to the point of zeh tov. That's the first paragraph in Tanya. Zeh tov. Doesn't have to be tov li, it's just tov. It's what God wants. Jewish nefesh abamis can come to that conclusion, come to that point. That's Bira Midas of the nefesh abamis. Right? That the making of the nefesh abamis is that maskana, the conclusion that we come to, and let's just put it in the simplest point of zeh tov li. And therefore, I want a connection to it. The midas of the making, simply, those of you who learned the Leisim Shekela, so that's what the Rebbe refers to there as his pailus sichlus, intellectual excitement. Mm-hmm. What if you get excited about an idea? If you get excited about an idea, then there's a chance that, so to speak, emotional excitement, still intellect, but it's the emotion of the intellect, the excitement you have about that idea. That's what allows that idea to penetrate into the actual midas themselves. So the generally in Tanya, if you learn Tanya simply, and this is what the Alter Rebbe explains, right, is that mechin give birth to midas. Okay, we know that. That's called das, which is the aspect of mechin, the seichel, the meyach of mechin. It's the third meyach. And that's the meyach responsible for transporting the intellectual understanding into an emotional state. Okay. When it's explained more fully in Maimarim through the other Rebbeim, so then what does that mean? There's actually a 4-step process. There's mechin, midas sheba mechin, mechin sheba midas, midas. right? The intellectual understanding, the excitement of that idea, so that I have, so to speak, an emotional connection to that idea, which allows that idea to penetrate into the mechin shebamidei shezet tov, which will produce an emotional desire to connect to something. Love it, be in awe of it, whatever it happens to be.
מייכים שבמידייס, מידייס שבמייכים מידייס?
No.
Oh.
Mechin mides shebamechin, mechin shebamides, midos. I don't have a pen, right? Is there a pen there? No. Okay, I'll remember to go to the office on our way downstairs, and I'll get a pen and I'll put it in my pocket, and then we can start writing on the board again. All the pens, I guess, are comments, and they were taken away. Okay, so let's go further. The afshe b'chol asine min chesem ba mi Michael behem aliyah shin yin aimer hu aveda v'nefesh abamis. Amnam, however, the ze gufa hi ba min adogim dafka. It's dogim. Hainu meiching the nefesh abamis. She b'nefesh abamis yin agam a meiching shvim shayochim elamides. Making are connected to midas, and in the nefesh abamis, the connection of making to midas is even more powerful because the making can often be more powerfully affected by midas, meaning. My making can be, hopefully it's not, but human intellect can be very powerfully affected by one's emotional desires, and that's bad intellect. It's called bad science. I want a certain conclusion. No, that's not science. It's not intellect. It's emotion. Right? I'll be happier if the answer is such and such and such and such. Well, don't trust that guy's research. Right? Okay. Because he's might fiddle with the dials, which they have been known to do. Okay. Now it might, not be his particular desire to come to any particular conclusion. It might be societal pressure to come to a particular conclusion. If he doesn't come to that conclusion, he'll lose his job, which is what happened with COVID. No one in the scientific community was allowed to disagree with the basic position that the American government established. And interestingly enough, it affected every scientist all over the world. And those ones who disagreed, except in Sweden, those ones who disagreed were fired. Now one of them is the head of national health. What's his name? The guy from Stanford? Really interesting guy. He has an interesting last name. He's like an Indian last name or something like that. Right. The three guys who came into Trump, one from Oxford, one from Harvard, one from Stanford, at the beginning of the whole thing, who pushed to not listen to what was being told by the powers that be. And Trump, unfortunately, didn't listen to them. They were all fired. Blackballed. Stanford, Oxford, and Harvard, right? I mean, you're not exactly talking, Mississippi State and Southwest Louisiana Tech, right? It's like pretty serious universities, right? Now, one of them, I think the guy from Stanford, he's now, he's been resurrected, right? He's now the head of the National Institute of Health. Serious guy. These are the leading whatever, I can never say that word, the epidemiologists. Right. These were the three leading guys in the world who all said, don't do what they're telling you to do. It's the end of their careers. Well, temporarily. Right? Okay, so what does that mean? That means everybody else allowed some sort of emotional desire to overcome their objective intellectual understanding of a particular situation. Now, it's not everybody. There's some people who disagreed with that. Intellectually, okay, fine. But in general, the whole scientific community went along with it, not because of the intellect of it, but because of the emotion of it. I don't want to lose my job. Okay, say that's, hard to blame the person. And that's the difference between intellect and emotion. Intellect is objective reality, and emotion is subjective reality. If I allow subjective emotion to cloud objective intellect, then it's bad intellect. Right? Now that's the nature of, to a great degree, that's the nature of the intellect of the Nefesh HaBahamis, to the extent that it's very often affected by the Midas of the Nefesh HaBahamis, because the Midas are so powerful and the intellect is relatively less powerful. Right? Relative to the Nefesh HaLokis. V'achar hakrovas eimer, and after the bringing of the eimer, hu inyan spheres eimer, counting of the eimer, hainu habider ba'midas the nefesh habahamis. Now the rectification of the midas the nefesh habahamis. The mitzvah lemimne yomi, it's a mitzvah to count days. Mimni lamed mem yud in Aramaic turns a three-letter root into an infinitive, right? And mani is like minyan, count. Minyan lemimni yomi, minyan lemimni shvui. The Gemara in Menachos. It's a mitzvah to count days, a mitzvah to count weeks, which is why we count the way we count. Right? Talked about it on Thursday. Right? The two different ways of doing it. Hayem arba'as hayem shehem shnei shavuos la'omer. That's the way Ashkenazim do it. Or hayem arba'as hayem la'omer shehem shnei shavuos. Which is how Usfartem do it. La'omer goes after the day, and then they say, and that is X amount of weeks and X amount of days. The inyan of Kravas Aimer, Bidur HaMeichin, Hashayachim El HaMides, the level of Meichin that's relevant to Mides, because ultimately it's all going to be about Bidur HaMides. Haya B'Tes Zayin B'Nisan, that was on the 16th of Nisan, B'Yom Aleph, on the first day of the Aimer. Aval inyan spheres Aimer, who Bidur HaMides Atzmam, that's the Bidur of the Mides themselves, which is a long, detailed process because of the nature of Mides. Hine, ze eina maspik, it's not sufficient, sheyeh bidur hamidas b'chlolis, that there should be some sort of general bidur of the midas. I'll be a nicer person. Ki'im, habir b'pratius, detailed birus, that's the nature of midas. They express themselves in very detailed and different ways. Hainu, she'abir b'chol midu midu b'ifnei atzmei, there should be a bidur of each and every midah unto itself. In other words, chesed, gvura, tiferes. V'oides, and even furthermore, shabidur tzarich leis b'prate pratius. It has to be in the detail of the detail. What's that? I know kol midah midah k'mei shehi klula mizayin. Each midah as it incorporates all 7 midas. Chesed shebechesed until malchus shebechesed. So in chesed itself, a complete bidur. All the different ways in which chesed, which is one aspect of our emotional reality, all the different ways in which chesed can express itself. Which is the midah of the midah. And the Rebbe is going to go through that. Da'az, that then, once a person is brought about that bidur, dafku achona l'matan Torah, that is the ultimate preparation for matan Torah. Heviani Melech Hadarav, which is the idea of the king bringing me into his chambers. And again, it's singular. One of the ideas of being singular is that the Nefesh HaBahamis and Nefesh HaLokis are together in their desire to receive the Torah. There's others also. Da Birur B'Chlolus, the general Birur, who Aveda B'derech Makif, is something, Makif, we know that is something residual, the Ein Nogei L'Peil, and doesn't affect action. Right? Going to be a nice person. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. As a nice person, you do nice things. Right? If you do nice things, then you're a nice person. There's such thing as being a nice person. You do nice things. Right? Okay, so then I'll describe you as a nice person, but why are you a nice person? Not because of the makif of it, because of the pale of it. It's all about doing it. Famous story of the young girl who asked the Rebbe in Yechidus, she said she's not nice. She feels that she's not a nice person. What the Rebbe tell her to do? Do nice things. So then the Rebbe asked her where she lived. She lived in a dormitory in a high school at that point. So the Rebbe said, why don't you set the table for other girls or bring them food every meal? Do something that expresses niceness. Being nice, what does that mean? So the view of the Midah is doing things that matter. Aval Ikar Aveda. So the Ikar Aveda of the Nefesh B'Amin is Aveda La'at La'at. It's very slow, steady Aveda. But Koyach Atzmei Dafka, that comes from himself, comes from below. It's Nefesh B'Amin. Ainu, Bira Amides Prate Pratios. Sometimes pronounced Pirte Pratios. Dafka. The prat of the prat, the detail of the detail. Kol mido, each mido, kameshi kula mizayim. As it incorporates all seven. Sha'az, that if a person does that, then he reaches the state of b'chol dracheh de'yehu. In all of your ways you will know him, Shlomo Melech says. Let's read the next line, then come back to that. Shemachshava dibur ma'aseh, that his thought, speech, and action, Yuka the boy, will be as they should be. Will be expressed not in some subconscious way, but in conscious thought, speech, and action. What's b'chol drachei de'ehu? There's two basic levels of avodah. Shekol ma'asech yu l'shem shemayim, that all your deeds should be l'shem shemayim. Zasichin. Chelek Yud, I think maybe Parshas Yetzeh. Chelek Yud. I think so. Parshas V'Yetzeh. Chelek Yud. The Rebbe discusses the difference between Shekol Ma'asech Yu L'Shem Shemayim and B'chol Drachei De'ehu. B'chol Ma'asech Yu L'Shem Shemayim. Everything you do should be for a positive purpose. You should eat lunch in order to have energy to learn Torah in the afternoon. Okay. That's Kol Ma'asech Yu L'Shem Shemayim. You're not eating lunch because it tastes so good, even though hopefully it tastes good. You're eating lunch because you need energy to go serve God. Okay. And that everything you should do should be understood in that context. Not an end to itself, it's a means to a higher end. That's one level. Then there's a higher level. B'chol drachei de'ehu. Eating lunch is an avodah. Eating lunch is part of your relationship with the Kodesh Baruch. How can eating lunch be part of your relationship with the Kodesh Baruch? I understand. Especially in yeshiva, you know. How can you eat? But yeshiva, I mean, this yeshiva, the food is, no one should complain.
Amen.
If you don't have to cook it, you don't have to clean up after it. It has to be pretty bad before you start complaining. In all of your ways, know him. So what's all of your ways? They're your ways. They're the things that you do. So what's a mashal? I once heard for b'chol drachei de'ehu, eating your mother's chicken soup. And every spoon is your relationship with your mother or your wife. My wife's chicken soup is better than my mother's chicken soup. Even my mother says so. Somehow my wife has this thing that she's a good cook, right? But she's not like, you know, there are cooks who are just like unbelievable. She's not an unbelievable cook. She's a good cook. You know, Baruch Hashem, she makes tasty food. But her chicken soup is pashut out of this world. Anybody who comes, just all our kids, they're all there. How does Savta make this chicken soup? Unbelievable. She used to be Ima, now she's Savta. She's not. Okay. Amazing chicken soup. So what's in every spoon? Your relationship with your wife is in every spoon that you eat. You're not eating the chicken soup so that afterwards you can tell your wife, "Oh, I love you. That was great chicken soup." No, every spoon you're eating is part of your relationship. All right? So how about the Eibishter? Everything the Eibishter gives us. So everything we do is part of our relationship with the Eibishter. I heard a beautiful story on Shabbos in Farbrengen that the Heiliger Regina was once by the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov was davening, and one of the sides of the talus of the Baal Shem Tov fell down. The Heiliger Regina picked that up and put it back on the Baal Shem Tov's shoulder. He started to shake. And he was shaking so much that he went to hold on to a table, and the table started to shake. because he said, I just touched the beged of the Baal Shem Tov. And he was completely taken by this and just overwhelmed by it, that he was able to touch something so unbelievably holy. So the Maggid brained about the story, and it was yesterday's Tanya. What's the whole world? What did the Rebbe say in yesterday's Tanya? The whole world is the levushim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, so what are you touching all the time? The levushim of the Eibishter. Why are we shaking? The Heilige Reginer touched the talus of the Baal Shem Tov and was completely ois mitch from being that close to Kedusha. This is the levush of the Eibishter. This is mamish. This is like the Eibishter mamish. We appreciate what it is. So that's b'chol derech Eideu, right? They're drinking this to have energy to learn Torah. No, this is also the Eibishter. Right? The very fact that the Eibishter created something that is as tasty and as useful as coffee. It's drinking coffee is part of your relationship with the Eibishter because it's his coffee. Right? B'chol derech Eideu. Wow, that's a whole different level. It's all his. It's not an end to itself. It's not a means to an end. It's an end to itself. Everything we do. Let's just finish this up and then we'll get to, I'll just mention it so you'll get up tomorrow morning, even though everybody here does. But, Peter Midas Bepratius. Sorry. The Af Shegam Mitzvah Lemimnei Shuri, which is the Midah of Chesed, Aval Iker Lemimnei Yemin. Right? The Iker is Mimnei Yemin. That's interesting why the Sfardim Dafka say Loimer after Yom. Because there's no question the Iker is to count the day. We also count the weeks. I would assume halacha, I don't know this for sure, but I can't imagine this isn't the halacha, that if I were to say this is the third week, I would not be Yetzi, where if I say this is only, if I only say this is the 15th day, don't worry, I didn't count tonight because it's not tonight yet, right? If I say this is the 15th day, so I'm Yetzi. I didn't say 2 weeks in a day, so what? I'm still Yetzi the mitzvah by saying today is the 15th day. If I say this is, what now? If I said this is 2 weeks in a day, then I assume I'd be Yetzi. I have to look it up, but I would assume that would also be, right? But if I just said it's the third week, then that would go. Bira Amidis Bepratius, Chesed Shebechesed, Hoid Shebehoid, which is Lag Beimer, Malchus Shebemalchus, which is Erev Shavuos. Now the Rebbe is going to say something really very, very interesting. And the whole thing's been interesting. Right? Ubezeh Yuvan Masha Bizman Agolas Yesh Chaluki Deis Binyan Mitzvah Sirse. And in this it's understood, and I'll just say it outside and we'll see it inside tomorrow morning. In this it's understood there's different deis regarding the mitzvah of Sfira Sa'imah. Is the mitzvah of Sfira Sa'imah today Deraisa, which is the Rambam, Derabanan, Tosfos, or a combination of both? We'll see that position of Rabbeinu Yerucham, which is really what the Rebbe wants to bring. Okay, why might it be only Derabanan? Well, Tosfos' position is that since we don't bring the korban, then there's no mitzvah aseh to count, because the mitzvah aseh is to count after you brought the korban, and since we don't have a base of mikdash, so we can't bring the korban, so therefore counting is all Derabanan. Tosfos says. The Rambam says no, there's two separate mitzvahs: it's bringing the korban and counting the Eimer. And even if you can't bring the korban, you can still count the Eimer. Where have you seen something similar to two things being connected? If you don't do one, the other's only Derabanan, but we do it recently in your life.
Oh, Mara.
Maror, you're fair. Well done. Maror, everybody holds. Maror, basically, everybody holds that Maror B'zman Hazeh is a mitzvah Derabanan. Why? Because the only time Maror is mentioned in the Torah is in the context of eating the korban Pesach with matzah and Maror. Matzah is mentioned a number of times by itself. So matzah is clearly a mitzvah deraisa, regardless of whether it's eaten with the korban pesach or not. But maror is only mentioned in the context of the korban pesach. So there's no mitzvah to eat, according to basically every position. There is no mitzvah to eat maror unless you're eating it with the korban pesach. So when I eat maror, the Rabbanim. That's why we're more makel in the Shiur of maror than we are in the Shiur of the first kazayas, the weed of matzah. Okay. So to taste this position of Sfir Seidim, which is very interesting, that it's all the Rabbanim. Don't worry, the Rambam, you can hold by the Rambam. Doing a mitzvah with the rice. Rambam says mitzvah with the rice, they're two separate mitzvahs. Taisva says if you don't bring the korban, there's no mitzvah with the rice to count Eimer, because you only count Eimer after you bring the korban. Rebbeinu Yerucham, we'll leave him for tomorrow morning, so you'll see his unique position, which is the position the Rebbe is going to explain. Because that's the only one that requires explanation. The other two are very clear.